So when we look at expressions that don't have any numbers, now actually what we're looking at is a highest common factor that will be a variable. So the highest common factor here will be a variable. So we've only got one variable in this question, just y. So let's have a think about it. I'm going to use the same thinking that we did. I'm going to write it slightly differently though. Remember, y squared means y times y, and then we're taking away y. So when I look at the first term, just change my colour. If I look at the first term and then I look at the second term, what is the letter that happens in both terms? The y. So my highest common factor in this case will just be y. So it's the same deal. The highest common factor will come out the front of your bracket. Now this one has a minus in it, so we will have a minus or a subtraction sign in the middle. And again, you can do the same thinking to think about, well, what's going to be inside my brackets? Well, y times what gives me y squared? Well, y times y. Y times what is going to give me just y? Oh, I'm going to need a 1 there. And again, you can check your answer. Y times y gives me y squared. Y times -1 gives me minus y. So you can do all of the same thinking. It's just now that you have all letters and no numbers to deal with. So let's have a look at something that's a little bit more challenging. So let's do this one. We'll throw some numbers in as well. -8mn squared. And let's go minus 12m squared n. Okay, so this highest common factor, because I've got numbers and letters, my highest common factor now is going to have numbers and letters. So I'm just going to expand it out for you, to help you see what the number, what your highest common factor will be. So it's -8, and I'm multiplying by m, multiplying by n times n. And then I've got minus 12 times the m squared, m, there's 2 of them, and then times the n. Alright, let's see what is common to both of these in terms of the letters. So when I look at the letters, I've got one m here and another one there, so that's common. I've got one n here and I've got another one here, so that's common. But I can't use, there are no other common letters. So there's one m and one n are both common. And then when you look at the numbers -8 and -12, I'm treating this as a negative. What is the largest number that can divide into both of those? Well, in this case, it's actually going to be it'll be 4, but I'm going to actually divide by -4, and I'll show you why that's the case. So it's going to be, my highest common factor will be -4, and then the letters we identified. There's an m and an n that I can take out of both terms, m, n. So when I go through and then do my factorized form, that is the same kind of thing. I'm going to have my number out, my highest common factor out the front. So -4mn, that's out the front. And then what is inside? Well, -4 times what gives you the 8. I need to times it by 2. And then I've got an m and an n, and I need one more n. So the letter that you didn't use, that has to go into your first term. Then -4 times what is going to give me -12. Now this is the tricky bit. Negative times what, in terms of signs, gives me negative. And negative times a positive gives me a negative. So if I go a negative times a positive, I'm going to get a negative. And then just think about the number. 4 times what gives me 12. 4 times 3 gives me 12. And then what letter was left here? The m wasn't used, so that goes into this term. So there's a lot going on there, but again, you can still check your answer. -4 times 2 gives me the -8. M, and then I've got an n, or n multiplied by n is n squared. -4 times +3 gives me -12. There's my -12. And then I've got an m times an m, that's m squared, and that n just stays there, so I know I'm right. So they're the ones that can be a little bit trickier with the signs, and you just need to remember, keep that sign in front of the number, and it always stays in front of the number that it's with, and then make sure that when you go a negative times a positive, you're getting your negative. Okay, so we're going to do some questions like that today. Good luck.